Hello again, everybody. This is Dan Clouser, and welcome back to the Journey of My Mother's Son podcast. Today I'm joined by one of my former players, Zac Schneider. We're at his house in Decatur, Georgia.
That's right.
So, Zac, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. Thanks for an incredible dinner tonight. Homemade pasta, homemade tomato sauce.
Yeah.
Really good stuff.
Single guy gotta take care of himself, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Sandy and I started this journey back in August, and one of the things we were most looking forward to is connecting with some of my old players. And, really the first couple months didn't have an opportunity to do that until back in October, late October. We got together with one of your teammates, Jimmy Everhart, and another one of my players who's younger than you, Garrett Pelko. And then just a couple weeks ago, we got together with another one of your teammates, Kyle Stover. And he also prepared a very good meal for us as well. And I'm not going to say which was better because they were both amazing, and they're different.
We can talk off camera.
So one of the things I want to point out is Zac is actually Dr. Schneider.
I was going to correct you, but I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah.
I always tried to avoid calling him Dr. Schneider, just a little dig we have between each other, but I do have to give props where props are due. So, Zac, tell me a little bit about your doctorate's degree, and since playing for the organization so many years ago, almost 20 years ago, as far as the showcase team.
Yeah, 20 years.
And then obviously you played on the college team for several years beyond that, but tell us what you're doing now, how you got the doctorate's degree, and what you're looking forward to in the future here as you just started the new position.
Yeah. So up until just a few months ago, I worked in higher education for my entire professional career. So maybe possibly 12, 13 years, working my way up through campus recreation and athletics and campus recreation departments. The first few years up in Pennsylvania, where we grew up, I worked at Alvernia University, Penn State Berks, and Newman University before I made the somewhat difficult decision to leave, friends and family and everything I knew behind in Pennsylvania to come start a new career down here in Georgia, Georgia Gwinnett College. And I spent 2 years there, and then I transitioned to Georgia State University, which is the largest institution in Georgia. We have technically over 50,000 students, with 32,000 of them at the main campus in downtown Atlanta, where I worked for 5 years. All in the meantime, I did my undergraduate at Alvernia. I got an MBA from Alvernia as a grad assistant. While working at Newman, I got a master's in sport management that assisted me with, furthering my career in the sports recreation world. And then I decided that I wanted to pursue a doctorate in higher education, so a doctor of education in higher ed at Immaculata University. And I actually finished that while I lived down here in Atlanta. I did the dissertation process, which was probably the most difficult thing that I've so far have done in my life. Took me a little while, but I did finish it, and the whole program in probably around 5 years. So it was a long bit. Very glad that I finished it. Very glad I, got through some of the difficult times while, working and, changing your topic 2 or 3 times, sending it back to the committee, them just tearing it apart, demoralizing you and your writing skills, but eventually, persevered, and now I get to have people call me doctor when I want them to. So, initially the plan was to, bounce around the United States, climbing the ladder in higher education, eventually becoming, a dean or a vice president in, student affairs or something of that nature. And unfortunately, that got or sidetracked once I found out how much I love Atlanta. I own a home here. I have a good, core group of friends. There's so much to do outside of pre-COVID. There was a lot of festivals, just a lot of things to do, great weather most of the time. And I really fell in love, with, just the lifestyle in Atlanta. So I had to make a decision. Do I want to stay in Atlanta, keep the same job, not, move my way up and and I thought long and hard, but the pandemic gave me some time to think, and I decided to make a switch into software sales. So now I work for a company called Student Bridge, based out of Atlanta, and we sell software or virtual engagement platforms, so like interactive campus maps, virtual tours, things of that nature, to colleges and universities. So my doctorate was not a complete waste. I do know, a thing or two about higher education, the lingo, who to speak to, the climate, the best practices and industry standards, which has really allowed me to really succeed in the first few months of being a business development representative. The hopes is to be an account executive in software sales, not necessarily stay in higher education specifically, but it's been a great fit so far, and looking forward to what Student Bridge has to offer in the near future.
That's awesome. So I want to back up a little bit and have you go into a little bit more detail about something you just said. You talked about how difficult getting your doctorate was, and having them tear it apart and stuff like that. Was there anything throughout that process where you took lessons you learned from playing baseball through that process? Because obviously the game is a game of failure. So were there any times where you could kind of relate to, all right, so this might have been a strikeout this time, but I got another at bat coming up.
Yeah, when in baseball, if you're hitting 300, you're doing well, and I can barely get over the Mendoza line. Is that what we call it in batting? So I definitely know a thing or two of failing, but trying to continue to persevere. I loved playing defense, playing third base, catching later on in my career, and when you make a mistake, you definitely can't let that ride you too long, or you're just gonna compound the mistakes and be a liability to the team. So even though the dissertation was an individual sport, so to speak, one, I couldn't afford continuing to go to school and paying more semesters of tuition while I hung around and debated on how I want to complete my dissertation, but also just for all the friends and family that were supporting me during that, I didn't want to let them down. I didn't want to let myself down. I don't want to say I'm a perfectionist, but definitely when I start something, I always try to finish it to the best of my ability. So it may have taken me a semester or two longer than the classmates in my cohort did or completed their dissertation, but ultimately I got to the finish line. It wasn't perfect. I struck out a couple times, but we completed the game.
That's cool. That's awesome. I love that analogy. Also want to go back to something you mentioned about the difficult decision of moving to Atlanta, Georgia, leaving your family and friends behind, and moving down here where you really knew no one, and kind of starting over. And obviously, for what Sandy and I are doing right now, somewhat similar, although we're able to connect with people like yourself and our friends scattered around, but we're also starting over, to an extent. So how difficult was it to make that decision, and what are some of the things that brought you to ultimately say, all right, we're gonna give this a shot?
Yeah, I mean, it was one of the most difficult decisions I made. I was very comfortable living in Reading. I had a large network of friends and people I knew, and ultimately I said to myself that if I wanted to advance my career in higher education, I was going to have to branch out and move away and move out of my comfort zone. And I know a lot of people say you have to feel uncomfortable to grow, and I think it is pretty true. I could have stayed in Reading, could have stayed having 2 or 3 roommates, renting a house, and driving 100 miles a day to Newman, and I just wanted more. So even though my parents are 800 miles away, great friends, really far away, technology allows you to kind of stay closer than you once were able to do. But it is difficult not going home for Thanksgiving and seeing friends and family for all the big holidays. But ultimately, to further my professional career, I thought it was worth taking that risk, kind of betting on myself. And that was the first time I did it. The second time was when I switched careers at 37 years old. I don't know if it was a quarter life or midlife crisis, but I went to an industry that I knew really nothing about besides, the sales world. I mean, I obviously am aware of, higher education, but it was a big risk, and fortunately, so far it's worked out. And
You've got BG in the background.
BG.
People can hear they're running around. That's
a young 10-year-old dog, just getting over ACL surgery, but she's back and testing out her limits. So yeah, she's bouncing around and playing with a squeaky toy.
Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. So I think that's so cool that you're able to to recognize that to grow you got to get out of your comfort zone like that. And you kind of answered my next question in that is I was going to say again, how difficult was it for you to now weigh the opposite decision where you wanted to stay in Atlanta? You talked about how you've now built a network of friends, and as opposed to taking a position in Stockton, California or somewhere else. So how scary was it to again leave the comfort zone of being in position you loved? I mean, I was here almost 2 years ago, and you took me a tour of the facility, and I can tell how much you loved your job and your coworkers there. So it certainly wasn't like you didn't like what you were doing,
for sure.
but for some reason you felt you could do more. So take me through that process a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it came to a point where living in a major city, single, owning a home, there's a lot of things that come in. I don't live a lavish lifestyle. I don't travel the world. I don't buy expensive things. But
no, you're quite cheap, just to point out to the crowd.
Okay.
Frugal. We'll say
Frugal.
Frugal.
Okay.
There you go.
With certain things. Other things I want the best that I can afford. But
that's true.
Yeah. So I realized that I did want to travel more. I did want to do other things and have nicer things. And unfortunately, higher education, you get a lot out of it. Personally and professionally, but monetarily, if that's a word, isn't the best. So I realized that if I wanted a family, if I wanted children, or things moving on, as I get older, I had to think long and hard. Am I either going to move for a better job, or am I going to stay in Atlanta and find a new career that is more lucrative? And like we already discussed, I love Atlanta. I love my friends that I have here. I love a lot of things about it, and like you mentioned, I almost potentially moved to Stockton, California for a position that I was a finalist for, but the pandemic ruined those options, and I'm kind of thankful. I kind of had a sigh of relief after that happened. So I then realized that I wanted to stay here, but higher education, a lot of people stay in that industry for their entire career, and that's great. I applaud them for that, but I knew it was time for me to move on. Not because I didn't like what I did, like you said. I still hang out with coworkers, stay in touch with all Georgia State and things like that. But very grateful for the new opportunity for being in software sales. It's a position that even a pandemic can't really slow down. It actually has made things more promising in the field. Obviously, there's certain industries that are struggling, but software sales has continued to thrive. So thought long and hard before I made the decision, but I'm ultimately grateful for it.
Yeah, it's awesome. And it's true, how everything happens for a reason. So when the pandemic hit and your opportunity in Stockton went away, you could have looked at that two different ways. You could have kind of sulked over, oh man, look what this pandemic did to me. I had this great opportunity lined up, and now here I am, and you just made your own new opportunity at that point. So I think that's great for people to really understand that we really do create our own path when we when we want to, and when you're constantly in a growth mindset to always be looking at okay, this happened, but now let's do this. And I think that can relate back to the game of baseball as well, where it's like, all right, so I hit into double play to end the inning in a big inning, but I got to go make some plays on defense here. And you'd mentioned earlier how you loved playing defense, and you were definitely one of our best defensive third basemen that we had come through the organization. And tell me, what was it about playing defense? I mean, you were one of those guys that at the end of the game, I think you were probably disappointed if you weren't covered in mud,
Yeah.
covered in dirt. Your jersey wasn't dirty. Your pants weren't dirty. What was it that you liked so much about diving for that line drive down the line to take away turn a double into an out? Just what was it that drove you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously really competitive, but just making plays that no one thought was possible, even at the level that we were playing at. It was pretty cool to see, and I'm never gonna just think I probably dove at balls that were 10, 15 feet away from me, but got to give it a try. You never know, and that's probably what allowed me to do a few of the things that I did, and just give my all, regardless, how dumb I might look, or how unrealistic making that play was. But eventually, you'll catch a few. So yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, we're just about out of time. Before we get to our final question, any last things you want to mention before we get into our final question here?
Yeah, I guess I do, just because of a conversation that we had with a former classmate and teammate. Earlier in the day, you were chatting with Mike McGinley, who I went to high school with, played Berkshire with, and I popped up on the screen when you were chatting with him. But within a minute, we were throwing out one-liners that were literally 20 years old that we experienced playing for Berkshire, and those are still the things that stick with you. And we didn't forget anything. You can talk about the smallest detail of Doubleday Farm, or being here in Atlanta, and all the crazy things we did as 16 or 17 or 18-year-olds, however old we were. And yeah, it's without, you're not missing a step. We're talking about the same old stuff, probably the thousandth time, but it never gets old. So just really appreciated that. Getting to catch up with anyone that was a part of that is always cool.
Yeah, no, that is so true. The things that we remember, the bulk of my memories of you guys are probably more off the field than on the field. And we had some great comebacks. We won championships together, but it's the memories off the field. And the last podcast I did was with Kyle Stover, and as soon as I put it up on Facebook, Greg Hughes makes a comment about being the greatest season he ever played, and then Jeremy Condisco makes a comment as well. And I forget which one of them said, hey, let's hit a while, which was Stover's go-to line when we came in from playing defense. So it is funny how, like you said, without missing a beat, those things just come to mind immediately. And it was great for me to be there as you and McGinley, we're kind of talking and reminiscing about that. It, makes me feel like, we definitely did some good in your lives, without a doubt. So, final question for you. Again, the subtitle of my podcast is Many Little People in Many Little Places, which is derived from the opening lyrics of a song by Michael Franti, which is the song Gloria, where he says, "When many little people in many little places do many little things, then the whole world changes." So what are one of the little things that Zac Schneider is doing in his life to make the world a better place?
Yeah, and I had to think about it a little bit, but throughout our conversation while you've been here, obviously we're in a really unique climate right now, and I don't think I would have gotten to experience it and grow as a person and be who I am today if I didn't live in Atlanta. Coming from Reading, Pennsylvania, a small, old steel town or coal town, whatever, to a large urban, diverse city in the South, and working in, at large urban institutions, large, or mid-sized public institutions, you really get a sense of what it's like to not be a white male in America. And being in Atlanta, especially in the last year, or 4 years, but the last year it really is amplified. I was part of protests, for the Black Lives Matter movement, which, when I lived in Reading, probably wasn't something I would have thought I was going to be doing when I was 37 years old. But donating to those causes, walking in those causes, we might be canvassing for the Georgia the Georgia Senate runoff that's happening in a few months. Friends and I, might be canvassing around the city and working on that. So a lot of things, it may have taken me a while to realize the importance of, you know, a white male's voice advocating for the less fortunate. But, you know, I think because being in Atlanta, the group of friends, diverse group of friends that I have, and, you know, working in higher education for so long and, you know, getting perspectives from all sorts of people that are not like me, I think has really allowed me to grow and has made it more important to me to, you know, say, you know, hey, I don't think this is right, or, you know, we need equality, and, you know, all the other things that are happening right now that, you know, that we're really supporting in Atlanta. Atlanta's been in the news a lot, for good, for bad, but it's definitely been overall a positive experience for me, and I think for my growth. So I'm just trying to do what I can in my, you know, own way to, you know, help advocate for others.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome, and, you know, you said it, you know, took you a while, but at least you got there. You know, it's better doing it at 36, 37 than never.
Right.
You know, so
For sure.
I commend you for it. I think it's work that matters. It's work that makes a difference. And like you said, coming from where we came from, you know, small town Reading, Berkshire County, we missed some of that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we missed some of that.
Yeah.
So I love that you're doing that. It makes me very proud that you're out there doing that work and speaking up for people that, you know, may not always be able to speak up for themselves. And like you said, as a white male, you know, we can help drive that change that we want to see. You know, and it's not so much, you know, I've did a lot of podcasts on this in the past, and, you know, one thing that I talked about is that it was really no longer acceptable to just not be racist. You had to actually be anti-racist.
Yeah, exactly.
And speak up against it. You know, and I was fortunate enough to be, you know, brought up by, you know, a mother and father who looked at everyone equally.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it never affected me. But by the same token, I actually had to start speaking up a little bit more about it. You know, and I think that, you know, the fact that you recognize that is awesome. So, Zach, again, I thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I thank you for dinner, for your hospitality, for Sandy and I this weekend. Hopefully, when you start getting the ability to travel, maybe you get maybe not as big of an RV as ours, maybe a little camper van.
I want to get one of those little, renovated vans.
Yeah,
that,
you can meet us in some campgrounds. Sure. You know, we talked about, you know, Stover going to Asheville, so maybe that's
3 hours away. Love it.
Next Berkshire mini reunion is. So listen to my other podcasts and check out my blogs at danclouser.com. Zach, once again, thank you so much, and baby girl, thanks for being quiet during the podcast for us. Thanks, Zach.
Thanks.